Grupa o Projetor Mtlashaya, Sams, Projetor Mtlashaya, Previa, Janela.
Bom, galera, sejam todos muito bem-vindos a mais um vídeo aqui no canal. Vamos falar do UFL, vou tentar traduzir o máximo que eu puder aqui, do alpha teste que nós vamos ter do nosso querido UFL.
Intro. Skipping to intro. What about button?
Hi everyone, it's Tigran here from Journey, and today I'm talking to you from Cyprus. It's hot, and we're going to be discussing the hot topic on Journey, the alpha test. In fact, as we speak, the CEO of Strikers, Eugene Nashilov, is preparing for our interview. Today, we're going to learn a lot of interesting stuff that I know you've been waiting for. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave us your comments about what you want to hear or see more of. We read everyone, we listen, and respond as much as possible. Hey.
Hi there.
So I've just said that the long-awaited alpha is on its way. Could you give us some basics first? Like what it is, what it's for, and if you can, what makes your alpha different from alpha versions of other products? Like, why don't we just release the game without external testing, without any alphas or betas?
Well, firstly, I'd say you don't have to bother with testing. Some teams don't. In fact, many don't. It rather depends on the game. In our case, we're releasing an alpha to get feedback. We actively want our audience, the players, who our game is ultimately aimed at once it's released, we want their feedback on what we've done. We want them to communicate to us the elements they like, the ones they don't like, every aspect of the game. So it's really about the core gameplay, the meta gameplay, everything. We consider that feedback extremely important. If I can put it this way, that's our philosophy. The one we pursue and advocate, and we want to stick to it. So that means we're going to be collecting lots of feedback and adjusting and fine-tuning the game off the back of it. So the game appeals to our players and not just us in the development team.
Well, of course, you have to understand, in the alpha test, we'll be testing many things for the very first time. For example, we'll be testing our servers for the first time. We'll be checking our infrastructure for the first time, and we don't know how it'll turn out. To be honest, we don't 100% know how any of it will turn out, so we need to test it on a small group of people first. That way we can understand where the issues are, because there will definitely be some. We're bound to have done something wrong or forgotten something. Through the feedback, we'll be able to spot those issues and fix them. That way we'll be sure that after the game's proper release, our players won't experience any technical issues, and all the teething problems will have been resolved. But that's regarding the technical side. It also applies to different bugs because, after all, even though we test the game internally, we could miss many things because our eyes might be clouded. Maybe we just don't test enough, or don't think the way some players will think.
My official job title is Head of Publishing. In reality, that means I'm in charge of a number of things. I'm in charge of establishing sales, communication, customer service, and both in-game and offline engagement. My overall job description would probably be creating connections between the product, which is the game itself with all its features, and our audience, all those people who will be playing UFL. And if you ask me what I'm doing regarding the alpha test, I'd say primarily I have to ensure that essentially the release happens at all. For starters, to organize an alpha test, we need to set deadlines. Secondly, we need to determine which features we will test, one by one, in the time frame of the alpha testing.
Some time ago now, we launched a website, and through that, started collecting subscriptions for the alpha and subsequent beta tests. At the moment, we're preparing some NDAs because, for obvious reasons, we need everything to remain more or less confidential, at least for a while. We're also creating questionnaires for the tests, and based on those, we'll conduct our initial interactions with the audience. And in the game code, we will define the events that we'll be tracking. They will enable us to learn how people play, what they do when they're in possession, the different ways they attack and defend, as well as what they do in the meta. which footballers they sign. All this will be in the alpha testing.
Can you tell us how many people are expected to participate in the testing? How many players will be in the alpha, for instance?
Initially, it's going to be quite a small number of people, and the main goal will be to maintain 300 concurrent users. By that, I mean that we want to have 300 people in the game at the same time, all looking for matches to play. I mean, that's the number of users necessary for us to ensure that our matchmaker can quickly build pairs, which will mean that no one has to wait too long for a match.
No QA can provide as much data or find as many issues as even a small group of enthusiastic playing testers. They will spot a texture hole where you would least expect it, or they'll discover the perfect angle for a shot. That means you can score every single time you try. Believe me, while they're playing, the testers will spot issues that game designers or QA teams couldn't even imagine. In game design, there's a classic mistake you always make when you set something up yourself. You work on it for so long, in your own little bubble, that your feedback loop on it kind of gets stuck. Then, to get any sense of what you're trying to achieve, you start turning screws, making the game more complex, more intricate, faster, and so on. What happens? Well, ultimately you end up with a game that's built for yourself, but that nobody else can play. This game is all about the gameplay on the pitch. We must never forget that what we have is a metagame. I won't go into detail here, but in a nutshell, this game is different from all other products in the genre. We've made some decisions within it, and we'll have to wait and see how people react to them.
So why release the alpha now? Why not 3 months ago or in 2 months' time? What influenced your decision to stop at this particular moment and say, we need external opinions? Let's do an alpha test.
First of all, let's be clear, we haven't stopped. The truth is, there's nothing bad or scary about conducting early alphas. Many developers do that. Here's a good example of one. Wait, what do you think? Am I allowed to mention other games?
Maybe we'll work it out.
If not, you can bleep me, I guess. So, the game, 3, which has been launched not that long ago, it's been about 3 years in alpha. All I can say is that's not the path we're taking. I don't think. At least, I hope not. Obviously, I can't say for sure, but we're not aiming for that time.
Some people might have just had a heart attack.
No. Rest easy. We're definitely aiming for a totally different time frame. But still, many developers devote a lot of time to balancing and testing the game to perfection. After all, ultimately, we're making games for the audience. It's the audience who play the thing. So we ask them, the players, to provide us with feedback, to find out how they feel while they're playing. That's actually the most important thing. We're not making games just for ourselves, are we? We're making games for the players. So it makes sense to ask their opinion.
We don't ask for their opinion randomly. We're trying to approach the whole thing as fairly as possible. It's another example of our principle of fair play. We began the process by announcing the alpha testing online, and thankfully people started submitting their applications immediately. Of course, the first ones to submit them were people who are either following us on social media or who regularly check in on our website for updates in the resources. So we're selecting people based on very straightforward criteria, really. Those are interest and involvement. By that I mean, the more you're involved in our story, the more you comment and communicate with us, the more likely it is that we'll invite you to test. We have several resources. For instance, it'll be a Discord chat, social networks, a YouTube channel, the channels of influencers who are interested in UFL. We've regularly announced the information about the start of our game's alpha testing, and the obvious implication is that the people who have applied quickest off the back of that are the most devoted part of our audience. In other words, the sooner you applied for the alpha, the higher the chance you're invited.
So this is a question for all of you. Mike, for you as a game designer, Max as CTO, and you, Eugene, as CEO, is it more important to invite alpha players who have super hardcore experience in all types of football simulation games? Or would you say you're also interested in the more casual player who might log in and play maybe once a week?
For me, I'd say it all depends on the stage you're at in terms of testing. In the early stages, we're bound to attract a fairly core audience. I mean, people who are very active on our resources, who are obviously really looking forward to the game being launched. Later on, we'll expand the audience to get everyone's opinion, but initially, I'd say it's precisely those players you mentioned first, the super hardcore ones, who'll provide us with the necessary data and feedback, so we can go in and fix the most obvious, most problematic issues.
I'd agree, but most importantly for me as a publisher, I think we need a core of like-minded people, a core of players who will remain interested in the game and stay with it for a long time. Normally in successful games, those players who participated in alpha testing continue to play for years. I guess they feel comfortable and enthusiastic. That means the main task is to select a group of good testers. The second task is to create a comfortable environment for them in-game, one in which they will continue to be interested and feel comfortable as they test the game.
It really comes down to a question of choice. We absolutely want to show people the game, we want to test it with them, and we have to arrange it in a correct way that will benefit the game. To be honest, there is no alternative. Working with the audience is the only option because it's the best. So we want to let players into the game. In the end, we want to trust them as they trust us and create a player-developer relationship built on mutual trust.
Generally speaking, I'm just really intrigued. How is it possible to objectively assess the balance, for example, between dribbling and tackling? Similarly, how can you correctly balance the passing versus, say, the long-distance shot and interception? How do you balance the attack for a shot on goal? A game designer can break down the situation and just arrange a one-on-one. For example, a striker up against the goalkeeper, and take hundreds of shots to draw some stats and all that kind of data. But that'll never replace the live game situation, which will always create unexpected events. Honestly, a player will create something that no one, even the designer, would ever think of doing in real life, and all by pressing the same buttons. No game designer is able to take in all the possibilities. That's the whole point of testing on a wider audience.
Now, obviously, it's important to understand that when we talk about feedback, we're not saying that we're going to ask absolutely everyone about everything they did. So in that example of Mike's, there's absolutely no guarantee that the player will tell us what he did and which buttons he pressed when. What we will do, however, is collect a lot of statistics. So we'll be able to gather tons of analytics, everything from which buttons are pressed, which buttons are not pressed, and when. We'll be able to look at general patterns, and that will enable us to understand what users don't like. Let's say we added a particular feature, but nobody's using it. The alpha testing will let us find out about things like that and fix them before the release.
As things stand, we don't know for sure how our player audience will be distributed around the world. Well, let's be honest, the planet is big and crazy, but true, not everyone around the globe is playing football all the time, even in computer games. But to be able to specify what we will have, for example, the ratio between the Western and Eastern hemispheres, 80 to 20, 30 to 70, or 50 to 50, whatever, we can't do that accurately, not yet. The same goes for the Northern and Southern hemispheres. This kind of information is really important to us. Ultimately, it defines where we should place our servers, so that players will have a correct ping. Further down the line, of course, it will also affect who we're able to invite for the subsequent stages of testing. We need everyone to have someone to play with, and that has to be planned carefully. And with all that stuff, the alpha test is going to help us a lot. For this first stage, we've created an environment where people can play regardless of their geography, no matter where they're based. And on top of that, it will give us the first real data of the geographical distribution of our users, or at least what the geographical distribution is of the most dedicated core of the target audience for the game. And further on, in the later stages, the ones involving more massive open testing, we'll be able to find a more definitive answer to the various questions we have.
For example, we're still working on through passes. To be honest, that's because we're not 100% happy with them. We've made loads of different iterations. I have to say, it already works pretty well, and it's done in a way that allows you to configure it. But how do we ultimately configure it? How should it look in the end? And how should it work within the game context? So many questions. Also, we have what amounts to a pretty complicated geometry of on-the-fly passes. It's important to consider where the opponent is standing so that you're able to pass the ball around them to your teammate. It's these sort of aspects that we still need to balance and fine-tune thoroughly.
A football match simulator is just that, a simulator. It's an illusion. There are some checks that are carried out on real football pitches so that the international football body will allow games to be played there. Seriously, there's a whole load of checks. For example, on the stability of the grass cover, on its strength. Honestly, this is true. One of the checks involves a ramp of a very exact size that is set at a 45-degree angle, okay? The ball is then rolled down the ramp, and for the pitch to be certified, the ball has to travel a certain distance across the pitch within a certain range. Referring to those strict physical data points, I set up the ball using the same parameters in the game, but it didn't turn out well. Everything looked too sluggish. It's clear to me that a significant part of the tuning is down to trying to capture and deliver the right feeling of dynamics. This isn't a value you can determine through strict physical parameters.
Wow, but in your opinion, all three of you, do you think it's even possible to find a balance between arcade and realism that would actually satisfy everyone?
I think the answer here is...
In a word, no.
No.
That'll be a no then. It's not possible. And speaking as a layman, I'd agree. Cool. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I'd say ideal balance in MMO games is mathematically unattainable with real time and real money. But by the end of the universe, who knows?
Your alpha tests have now started. They're ongoing. And that means that you're receiving information and collecting telemetry. I'm wondering, at what point do you decide you've got what you wanted and you can move on?
The most important parameter is that people like it. Do real people enjoy playing our game? Of course, during the alpha test, the game is not in its final version. That's the point of the alpha test. Later, more content, more mechanics will be added, and so on. But in the alpha test, we check if people are willing to play it, if they like the core gameplay mechanics. As I say, ultimately, do they enjoy it?
Okay, and now a tricky question. Are there elements of the game that you won't allow to be tested during alpha?
Yes.
Can you enlighten us at all?
At the very least, you can't buy items in the alpha test.
Actually, buying and acquiring things is a significant part of a game player's experience. Of course, we'll be providing resources that will later be sold for real money, but it's just not possible to test this part of the experience within an alpha test. I mean, yes, it's true, you can do it mathematically in the same way, but I would say the motivations and feelings are very different in real life.
Now be honest, how often do you play UFL?
Every day.
Every day? Wow, okay. How many hours?
That's difficult to say, several matches at least. When we were putting the feature-complete version together last week, it was player-ready by the end of Thursday. On Friday morning, I played for 4.5 hours straight. I didn't even take a break. And I'm not just talking about a few matches back-to-back. I played the entire game, the actual product. I bought players, customized stuff, changed formations, tactics, and collected resources. In short, I did pretty much everything.
Wow, amazing. And did you encounter the issue of tunnel vision, where you really want to experience something as a player, but you can't, of course?
Well, luckily that's part of my professional skill set, being able to look at things from that angle so I know how to do it and not get affected. But looking at the same thing for too long, too often, it is definitely possible to start losing touch with reality a bit. When that happens, or you can feel it coming on, it's best to take a break, disconnect, switch to other non-product related tasks, some, I don't know, general company tasks, you know, strikers tasks.
As I said, the alpha stage is already underway, implying that the release is getting closer. It's not far away now, somewhere on the horizon. You've been creating this game for a long time. Have you ever experienced burnout? When you feel like you can't go on anymore? Be honest.
Of course not, Tigran. Never have, not once in my life. We're so close now, it's exciting. To answer you honestly, as we speak, we finished the stage of serious crunch. We finalized the feature-complete version. Believe me, we've worked our tails off over the weekends. And not just us, the whole production team and more besides. It's been tough. Yes, it's not like a stroll around a golf course. It doesn't work that way. It can't. It's a lot of persistent work involving a lot of people at the same time. And yes, people can suffer burnout and people can have a crisis of confidence. But